A new Gallup poll highlights the dramatic shift in U.S. politics, showing more Americans see themselves as Republicans or leaning conservative than those who see themselves as Democrats. And the GOP is now holding a 5-point lead on that front. The Democrats had a nearly 10-point edge about a year ago. Think about that. Not just a flip, but a big one. In fact, President Biden's party had its highest approval in decades when he first took office last January. Now, the stunning reversal. While some people blame the Biden administration's missteps for it, one Democrat strategist is pointing fingers elsewhere.
He got infrastructure passed, and that's a good thing because success can breed success. He is putting the full force of the presidency behind it. I think the problem for the Democrats right now is not that they have bad leaders. They have bad followers.
Okay, so you want to take on the entire American voting force, Pete. A record number in the last presidential election. You're going to take them on and blame them.
Yeah, apparently, I looked at the totality of his comments. I think he was attempting to say, we need to mobilize behind the things Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are trying to do in the streets and in the communities and build that grassroots support. Build the grassroots support for what? For voting, what you so-called voting rights legislation, which actually is federalizing our elections and codifying so many of the things that went wrong and were too wide open in 2020. We can go down the list of things they've gotten wrong. You remember when the NRA dubbed Barack Obama gun salesman of the year 8 years in a row. Nobody sold the Second Amendment better than Barack Obama. Same thing at play here. Nobody sells the Republican Party better than the reality of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, an unholy combination of ideology and incompetence. Ideology on what they're pursuing, incompetence in how they execute. Case in point, something like Afghanistan. Republicans will have to ultimately say what they're going to undo and how they're going to stand for it and what they'll legislate for in 2022. But right now, manifest failure and crazy views is driving people to say, you know what, the Republicans at least look sane.
So, Jenna, how do you explain the president's numbers being so tightly yoked to where the party is going now? Should Democrats be concerned because he's sinking that they're sinking too?
Well, I think that this poll is a reflection of the level of concern that all Americans have about the state of the country and the direction we're headed. In the same Gallup poll, Harris, I think this is a really important piece of data to make sure that we're putting into the middle of this conversation. When respondents were asked whether or not they would choose Republican, Democrat, or independent, most of them selected independent. And I think it's an example to show that most of Americans really do fall in the middle, and likely either political party aren't really speaking to them morally, logistically, politically, all of the above.
You know, that's interesting, Kaylee, because independent is not a political party. In fact, it tells me something different than what it tells Jenna. It doesn't tell me how they see themselves as independent. It tells me that neither party is doing their job here in their eyes, and they don't want either party. Like that doesn't help anybody, but it is helping Republicans right now. Why do you think that is?
So I take a different view. I think the Republican Party is articulating a positive vision. It's the vision that we saw for 4 years, where we had a booming economy, where there were more Black Americans, Hispanic Americans with access to the economy, their wages going up at a rate never seen before. There is a lot of good that the Republican Party did over 4 years, and I think people are craving the good old days where, you know, there weren't empty shelves, where there wasn't a supply chain crisis. And I think the polling speaks for itself. When you have the biggest shift in voter identification in 30 years, 3 decades, a 14-point swing in Gallup's poll from Democrat to Republican. That means not that everything's going wrong and people are just moseying over to Republicans. No, they're actively fleeing to the Republican Party. And by way of comparison, I would say this. There was a smaller shift in party identification in 1994. It was a 10-point shift. They recognized it in the polling then, in Gallup's polling. Well, what happened in 1994? It was something called the Republican Revolution, where the Republicans picked up 54 House seats, 8 Senate seats, took the House and the Senate for the first time in 40 years. So, Jenna, you could say this is all about independence, but there's a big red wave coming in November, and Democrats can put their head in the sand, but they're going to have a hard time ignoring the red tsunami.
All right. All due respect, Emily. Kaylee called your name. Jenna.
Yeah, I really am gonna align with Harris here, that I think that this is a reflection that neither party is speaking to the American public in ways that make us enthusiastic about paying our taxes, sending our kids to school, asking hard questions about science or whether or not we should be wearing a mask or shouldn't be wearing a mask. I mean, this is about the fact, this is specifically saying, to politicians, you're not a reflection of who America is.
Well,
Jenna,
you're not
just
a
real
reflection.
Quickly.
I would say Virginia pretty much does. The first black lieutenant governor, the first Latino attorney general, and then you had Glenn Youngkin at the top. I think that's a pretty good reflection of America.
Yeah, and Jenna, you're characterizing what I was saying in general, how it usually works to make it fit your argument, and don't do that, because that's not what I said exactly. And what I said is normally it would play out that way, but right now it's not. Republicans are winning the argument, and voters are making that decision right now in what we're seeing in surveys. Emily, I want to get to this with you. The RNC national spokesperson Paris Denard weighed in on the shift in party affiliation this way.
We view this as a direct correlation between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's failed policies coupled with the Democrat agenda in the House and the Senate to where the American people feel, how the American people are reacting to this radical administration.
He's talking about the realities that Americans see versus the rhetoric that Americans hear from politicians, Emily.
And I think his messaging was reflected in 2 points in that Gallup poll that President Biden needs to worry about. Here they are. Number one, that true liberals are actually a very tiny minority at less than 25%, and that the amount of independents who disapprove of this president as of January 7th is 57%. So whether or not you align yourself with a Democrat or a Republican, it is those two groups that we see the president needing to cater to, we see him catering to the far left, obviously, to the point of him just now about rhetoric. His policy is absolutely reflecting that surge, and yet it's the independents who show their disapproval, and those are the votes that they would need in the midterms that, to Kaylee's point, we will see a red wave overcoming. And I have to say what I found amusing at a minimum, but another disheartening thing about this administration is the reset plan senior administration officials have now come out and said that Biden is going to undertake, where they say, well, we want him to communicate more directly with the American people. We're going to stop publicizing his conversations with our legislature, and yet we're not sure exactly what that means, other than closing the door yet again to another avenue that the American people desperately crave, which is information and transparency of this government, because all they know is what's on their kitchen table, and it's looking like a whole lot less under this administration.
Well, look, everybody's saying kind of the same thing about the importance of independence. I mean, Jenna, you see it one way. Kaylee, you see it another way. I report on it a different way and see it another way. Pete, how do you really reach them?
Well, I think you meet them where they're at with the issues that they really care about. And I would piggyback on what Kaylee said. I think absence makes the heart grow fonder. They took for granted, a lot of people, call them independents, call them moderate Republicans, call them moderate Trump supporters, whatever, took for granted the good days of what Donald Trump delivered, didn't want the mean tweets, maybe, oh, I'm an independent, I want to disassociate from that, I'm a little tired, so they moved in another direction. Now, a year later, they're looking at bare shelves and inflation and embarrassment on the national stage and crime and COVID nowhere near solved, and they're going, whoa, 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 whoa. I want to go back to the guy who actually knew what he was doing. And I think that's a big part of the shift as well.
I loved it when Kaylee said the good old days, because I was like, well, that was 16 months ago. Is that what she's saying? All right, let's move on.
That's what I was saying.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.